get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Ami Kassar of MultiFunding. And Ami, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And I remember I was at EO Eccentric and Ami came on stage and for maybe 60 seconds. And what he said in that 60 seconds, I went back to my friends in EO and I'm like, that was the best talk of the day. So we'll talk about some of the things that you talked about in that 60 seconds, but in general, what you do and how this relates to, it really helps business owners. But some past episodes include, since this is going to be part of the EO series as well, I had EO Nashville member Robert Hartline. He built up a chain of cell phone stores to over $100 million. He has a software called Callproof. He sold that company, that chain of cell phone stores. And so that was a great episode. Another one was an EO Israel member, Eitan Chetayat. He's an agency founder. He talked about working to launch Gmail in Africa and how he's helped build brands across continents. And also EO Israel member Ron Geva, founder of Webs.io, and they help companies with brand protection, monitor the dark web and security for companies, and much more. So check those out on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 200 relationships. How do we do that? We actually do that by helping you run your podcast, or an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. So we do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. You know, I mean, we call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they can develop amazing relationships and create amazing content. You know, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. Ami also has a podcast, and you can check it out on multifunding.com on their resources and podcast page. So just without further ado, Ami Kassar is the founder and CEO of MultiFunding. They're a Philadelphia-based consulting firm that specializes in helping business owners across the United States. They develop creative and cost-saving alternatives for their business debt needs and structure. He's also the author of The Growth Dilemma and speaks nationally to entrepreneurs and business owners who desire money to grow their companies and improve their cash flow and or restructure debt. So, I mean, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be with you, my friend.
So let's just start off with, I know, you know, basically you got fired on a Friday and then started your company a couple of days later, but talk about MultiFunding and what you do.
Sure. So our whole mission is, you know, we all love entrepreneurs, MultiFunding, and our mission is to help them and help them succeed. And so really what we do is we listen to stories. People call us because they think they need money, although sometimes they may or may not need it. Sometimes debt may or may not be appropriate for them. And we listen to the stories and we try to understand where they are and what their challenges are and where they're trying to get to. And then take that story and put it into the debt markets and help them understand what their options might be, if there are options for them, to get their business to the next level. Then if they want our help, we package up their information and we take it out to a national network of lenders we've built and find them the best lender to get the loan done and allow them to move on with the next stages of their business.
Talk about that for a second, which is a scenario where they thought they needed money and you thought otherwise. Because you have some really good insights into when people come to you, and you may make recommendations against maybe what that person's thinking, and sometimes you probably get pushback.
Well, I mean, there are a number of examples, but if you have a good strategy and you run a good business, money is the easiest thing to solve for. But if you think money is going to fix all your problems, it's usually going to make them worse. So sometimes people will call and they'll say, I need $1 million. And the next question is, for what? And the answer is, I don't know, I need $1 million. And the answer is, that's not good enough. And then you're helping me think of a story early on when someone was adamant that they needed $1 million. And I said, okay, tell me the story, your financials of your business. And it sounded like if they were lucky, they were going to get $100,000 where their business was. And I told them that. And he said to me, don't you understand? I need $1 million. And someone told me they can get it from me. I said, really? And under what conditions? Yeah, well, all I have to do is wire them $10,000 and they'll get me $1 million. That's so if you need money, you need to have a good idea about what you're going to use it for. The money is going to cost you money. You're going to pay interest on it. And you have to have a strong thesis about how you're going to make a lot more money than the interest is going to cost you. And can you afford the monthly payments? Otherwise, it's a bad idea. Sometimes people also think they need more money than they actually do. So one time, I think I shared this story in the book, but a woman called, and of all things, she had invented the world's greatest horse shampoo.
Horse shampoo.
Horse shampoo.
Okay.
And some Joan had taken the only $40,000 she had to write a business plan for a $5 million raise. And if I'd taken the time to print out the thing, I would have probably killed a few trees in the process. And she needed $5 million to buy her building and get her equipment and hire her management team. And I asked her, have you sold anything yet? And she said to me, you don't understand. I can't sell anything until I have all this stuff. And I said, no disrespect, but you need to burn that business plan and go find a co-packing facility and go start knocking on doors and try find a place and try see if you can actually get customers buying this stuff. She didn't like that, which is okay. I never heard from her again, but I can't imagine she got her $5 million.
Hopefully, just a minimum viable product to test the market.
Sometimes people have them sort of like payrolls due on Wednesday and they don't have cash. And there are in the world these incredible temptation of these predatory lenders who are offering you the money in your bank account in 24 or 48 hours. And we don't do those loans. We're going to encourage that entrepreneur to do is to slow down, cut some payables, find some other ways to do it, stretch some things, but these exorbitant, fast-moving, high-interest loans, those are like oftentimes last nail in the coffin. I'm not in the business of putting the last nail in any entrepreneur.
Let's talk through, some scenarios, right? So we'll talk through some scenarios where maybe someone wants to buy a business, maybe a scenario where someone wants to buy out their partner, an expansion, hiring people. And that's kind of goes into when you got on stage, your compelling 60-second talk that I still remember. Start off talking about expansion loans.
Well, but let me just back up for 30 seconds if I can. When it comes to acquisitions, and in fact, in a lot of the work we do, we use the SBA products. And the SBA has a major branding problem, a little bit like EOS implementers. Okay. So people think EOS in EO is religion. Your EOS experience is really as good as the person who's helping you through it. And some of them are amazing, and some of them are conducting practice. With SBA loans, people think that their friend's experience with an SBA loan is the SBA. Or people think that their experience with a particular lender, maybe historically, as the SBA. And that's not the truth. There are about 1,200 lenders in the country who do SBA loans, but only really about 100 who know what they're doing. And so sometimes people get stuck with the wrong lender, or they get stuck in a big bank where someone's giving them misinformation about the SBA. So the key about SBA lending, if it's the right thing for you, is being with the right lender. And we have hired and fired a lot of SBA lenders over the years. So with that fabric, SBA is an incredible tool if you want to buy a business or buy out a partner. One thing people don't know is a lot of people don't know, if you want to buy a business that's just like yours, the SBA will consider that to be an expansion loan. And you can do that with 0% down. So it's essentially 100% financing on a 10-year note without any prepayment penalty. That's what an expansion loan is, and we do them all the time. If it's a business that is not like your business today, or you don't have a business today, you can do that 10% down, or sometimes even 5% down. Again, the benefit, 10 years to pay the loan back. And if you have a partner in your business who you want to buy out, you can also do that with 0%. And I'm happy, Jeremy, if you want to go into some of the more important mechanics of an SBA acquisition. But whether it's a partner buyout or straight acquisition or an expansion loan, a lot of it's going to come down to the appraisal. And the SBA lender is required by law to order an appraisal of the business by an SBA approved appraiser. And the methodology is essentially around cash flow. And so sometimes a great way to pop the air out of the bubble on these valuation questions is get the appraisal. It cost about $2,500, even earlier on in the process, even if maybe you're going to have to order it again. And if the appraisal is the appraisal, and then if the buyer and seller agree on that number, you can move on. And the same holds true for a partner. So if, Jeremy, you have a partner in your business and one of you wants to go, it's pretty easy. And you're 50-50 partners, order the appraisal, say the appraisal comes in at $2 million. Either of your shares is worth $1 million. And then you can decide, does one want to buy the other out? It provides some logic. The thing about business is, if you're going to go buy a house or want to sell your house, if I go into Zillow today and my house says my house is worth $1 million. My house is worth somewhere between 900 and $1.1 million, but it's not worth 10. Okay. And that's what the appraisal process helps with in the SBA. And oftentimes the transactions we help people with are actually quite friendly. An employee wants to buy a company from a business, and that's the legacy that the owner wants to leave. Sometimes it's an interfamily transfer, etc. Sometimes partners, in a happy way, just want to go on and do different things.
That was your compelling, one of my favorite talks of the event was that 60-second talk you gave about the expansion loan. And I immediately went back and told a bunch of people who were looking at doing that exact thing and buying something similar, a similar business. There was a scenario where you had someone and they bought out, because some people think, well, I own 10%. I think the person in this scenario, their partner owned 90%. What are some of the things that you saw in that scenario that, with the process that people should know about?
In the scenario, this is actually a YPO friend of mine out of Philadelphia, whose first job out of college was at a company. And he worked there before he bought it, I'm going to go say 30 or 35 years. And he became the owner, almost like a son to the owner. And over time, he had collected some equity. I think he had 10% equity in the company. And then it was time that the owner wanted to retire. And the transaction was possible. So there was an appraisal of the business. In this case, it included some real estate. And let's just say for round numbers, the appraisal was $5 million. The owner's share was worth $4.5 million. And the younger partner was able to borrow the $4.5 million from the SBA to take out the other 90% of the owner. In that case, because there was also some real estate involved, we were able to get a longer amortization than the 10 years for the total, and it helped with the cash flow. The most important thing I encourage people to think about when you are looking at a transaction, and this could be whether it's for an acquisition or even just a loan term debt for your business for growth purposes. If there's one number that's the most important number to stare at and look at, it's what's the monthly payment going to be. Sometimes people get caught up and they focus exclusively on APR. And so sometimes you would say, why would I ever pay 10% if I could pay 8%? And on one level, you would never want to do that. On the other level, if the 10% note amortizes out over 10 years and the 8% note amortizes out over 5 years, your monthly payment is going to be dramatically different. Financial strategy is about buying flexibility. You want to keep as flexible as you humanly can. And the world we're living in is a tinderbox and is full of unexpected surprises. If you bought a business the month before COVID hit, which is something nobody saw coming, and the world felt great, what monthly payment would you rather have? Our memories are short. The trees don't grow to the sky forever. and businesses rarely ever go in a straight line.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I was watching a webinar that you were conducting, and you proposed this question with these two scenarios, and you asked people to respond. And it's funny, I don't remember, maybe it was 70% took the lower interest rate, or were like, which one would you take, right? And people were responding, and you said the same thing. It's like, well, from a cash flow perspective, you want lower monthly payments. And also, if there's no prepayment penalties, you always just pay it down over the same amount of time. But you have, like you were saying right now, is that flexibility to have lower payments each month.
An
The
example around that, Jeremy, is sometimes people will call me and they go, I want to buy this building, but I'm 60 years old and I want to be out of debt by the time I'm 70. So get me a 10-year note on the building. My answer is, I wouldn't recommend that. Get a 25-year normal note on the building, pay it down as fast as you can. But if suddenly the SHIT hits the fan, you need the flexibility of that lower monthly payment.
Yeah. What do you tell people in I'm sure it ebbs and flows, but people are getting frozen by high interest rates?
You have to think about, Jeremy, like, well, here's a scenario, and I remember this so clearly. I had a call scheduled, a planning call with somebody. I can't remember if they were an EO or not, the day after Russia invaded Ukraine. And they canceled the call. They said, Russia invaded Ukraine. The world's too risky. We're not expanding our business anymore. Okay. I don't agree with you, but okay. Interest rates are dramatically higher now than they were 2 years ago. We lived through an unparalleled period of low interest rates. So some people, just like the guy who canceled the call after Russia invaded Ukraine, have put all their expansion plans on hold because they can't fathom or accept the high interest rates. My answer to that is, okay, but this might just be part of the furniture for a long time. We don't know. Anybody who can tell you where interest rates are going to be, or predicting with a straight face where interest rates are going to be by the end of 2024, is lying. We are living in there's no playbook for the economic dominoes of COVID. And so, yes, interest rates are high. Other expenses are higher also. Labor is higher. Raw materials are higher. Stuff is more expensive. Yeah, it would be great if interest rates were back to what they were 2 years ago. We wouldn't see that in our lifetime. So either accept it or stop investing. But realize that you might be freezing yourself. A guy called me, a friend of mine, several months ago, and he'd been eyeing acquisition for 10 years. Exact same type of business that he is. The competitor was ready to retire. He dreamed about this acquisition for a decade, and he was frozen by the higher interest rate. We did the math. The difference in payment was about $2,500 a month, which he could afford.
It was a psychological thing.
The psychological thing. My advice to him was, buy the damn business. I don't think he actually ever did. My advice is try not to get frozen by the interest rates. It stinks, but Lots of other stuff stinks. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. So you're part psychologist with the business owners when you take them through this process?
We're money therapists. There's no doubt about it.
We talked about the expansion loans. There's also one you've mentioned in the past about one without a lien.
So another use of SBA loans that many entrepreneurs don't realize or think about. Jeremy, can we role model? Can I throw a question at you?
Shoot.
If Uncle Joe gave you a gift, $350,000, and he said to you, you have to invest it in your business and use it for things that you're not doing today in the next year, or he's taking it back, what would you do with the money?
Spend it? Specifically what I do? Or, I mean, yeah, I take it and probably the things I should be doing anyways, I imagine, which.
Yes, I'm not holding you to it.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you would invest in that you're not doing today?
I mean, one of the things we are looking into, but is acquisition, purchasing a business. So we'd use it towards something like that. Probably, more paid acquisition. As far, we're, doing a little bit of that, but not tons. So we'd put it into marketing, advertising costs, and then because of that influx, probably more staff, I imagine.
So why aren't you doing that today?
I knew you were going to ask me that. Well, we're working towards some of those things, but we haven't gotten to that point on some of them either.
So the Uncle Joe question is an interesting question, and I like to ask it in my workshops because it takes all the excuses away. Oh my God, I got this pot of money, and the only condition of it is I got to do this stuff that I'm not doing today. Well, everyone pretty quickly can come up with a shopping list. And then the next question is, well, why aren't you doing those things? And the answer is, well, I don't have the money. Well, actually, with a good business plan, you could get the money. Okay. So, but part of the problem with that, Jeremy, in our community, and we have this problem also, it's not me preaching, it's that entrepreneurs have a very difficult time really understanding their business models and the drivers in their business models, and have a very difficult time making forecasts and projections. So one of the workshops I love to teach is a growth lane workshop, or we help a company build a velocity matrix. And the idea behind the velocity matrix is you track how much money you spent last year making investments in your business. So this is not money you spent because you had to. It's money you spent because you wanted to. Money you spent trying to grow and innovate and evolve and grow. And there's a number. Everyone's number is different. Most people don't know that number. Say your number is $250,000. I'm making it up. The next thing I ask in that workshop is, okay, well, next year, if you were to triple that number and invest 750 instead of 250, what would you do with the money and where would it take you? And then I ask you to prioritize and cut it from 750 to 500 and 500 to 250. Understand what the financing choices are for those things, and then make a plan going forward. Where people get stuck in that process is they're not really clear at their forecasts and their projections. And that's challenge I continue to wrestle with about how to help entrepreneurs with that. Many people don't really know the drivers, the economic drivers of their business model. If you were going to spend more money in marketing and advertising, what do you have a good handle on what that, or at least a thesis about what that could do for you and what the dominoes might be? So if you did that or decided to risk some money trying that, you can measure it against a hypothesis.
I mean, you've helped some Shark Tank businesses. It makes me think of Shark Tank because sometimes they will ask, well, what are you going to do with the money? Right. And the people have to answer. What's been some things you've seen in your experience from you see a little different side of these Shark Tank businesses. Some of them come to you.
So I have beef with Shark Tank as a show because I think I call it the Shark Tank myth. And we teach kids that the only way to build a business or the cool way to build a business is to get a famous investor behind you. And I would love to see an SBA lender on Shark Tank or somebody who knew the loan markets. They certainly would never let me on. They don't like me. But to say, wait a second, we'll lend you the $500,000. You can keep control of your company, but I'm going to take a lien on your house. So you can sell 40% of your company to Mr. Wonderful over there, or I'll lend you the money. You got 10 years to pay it back, and I'm going to take a lien on your house. What do you want to do? And not in all scenarios are there lending options for those companies. Sometimes equity is the only option for those companies. And I think it would be good education for the listeners to even hear that, or the viewers. As I'm out here, I don't see a viable lending option. So that's a little bit of my beef with Shark Tank. We had hoped clean up a bunch of Shark Tank messes. And our experience, at least from the limited portfolio we've helped with, is that the investors largely disappear and haven't really been there to give the support and love that they pretend to. That might not be the case with all scenarios, but that's the cases we've had. In one particular case, and I think this is important for people to realize, one of the investors had higher than 20% stake in the company. And if you take on an investor or an angel or anybody that has a higher than 20% stake in the company, you're not going to get a loan without them being willing to personally guarantee the debt. And usually they're not. So in that case, to save that company, the entrepreneur had to go back and convince the shark to take a haircut in their equity so the company could get debt, because he wasn't willing to do it. Ironically, he was never allowed to talk to that shark. He could only email him. I don't know about you, but I don't think you have nuanced, thoughtful mentoring conversations over email with one word answers.
So, yeah, that's really interesting. So, someone has more of a 20% stake. They need to actually have someone sign and personally guarantee, which they're probably not going to want to do, I imagine.
They won't do it. So you're precluded. once you take one investor with more than 20% of the company, you're precluded from you're likely going to be precluded from debt unless they're willing to personally guarantee, or you're going to be precluded from debt that involves a personal guarantee.
I mean, what's some other examples you mentioned? I mean, this we're talking about Shark Tank here, but I'm sure it applies across the board. When they come to you and you had to clean up some Shark Tank scenarios, what's some examples of kind of the cleanup and what that looks like?
That's the right word, but I think what people have to realize is that debt markets change and companies change and needs change over time. I just had a call with a EO member who's expecting his business to triple this year. He wasn't profitable. He was about break even last year, and he expects to really triple this year, and his working capital's tight. Currently, he has 2 lines of credit, and he probably needs to move to an asset-based lending facility that will lend to him at a percentage of his inventory and a percentage of his AR, which is tough to swallow because it's going to be more expensive than his current credit. But he probably has to suck it up and do it for at least 12 or 18 months and move to this type of facility before he can go back to regular lines of credit. We couldn't see that 2 or 3 years ago, that scenario coming, and it's okay. But if you're sweating payroll, I don't know about you, Jeremy, I've had many months of sweating payroll in my life. And when you're sweating payroll, it's sure as hell to concentrate on anything else. So making sure that your company has the right debt instruments so that you can flourish and concentrate on health and growth and strategy and moving forward and partnerships is the right thing to do. If you don't have, you're going to make payroll on Wednesday, all you're concentrating on.
And there's obviously, I know you've mentioned things as far as someone's, whether it's acquisition or hiring, and there's definitely options out there. There's a business you help. I'm wondering, what are some of the things you did there? It was a trucking business.
It's my favorite client ever. A trucking company out of Northern California, and high school dropout. Started as fixing trucks. Now he's actually retired, and his son's running the business. They have I think, a fleet of about 300 trucks. And do you know what his dog's name is?
Dog.
It's just who he is, right? Very simple, clean, everything's good. And in that case, he was about to enter into a big job, and cash flow was going to be very, very tight. And so we used a lot of his trucks, some of his real estate, and we amortized them out on a 25-year note. And we were able to improve his cash flow by like $1 million a year, which really helped him push through that job. So there are sometimes financial tricks that you can do to help the business through scenarios like that.
I mean, first of all, thanks for sharing your journey. Thanks for sharing your lessons. I have one last question before I ask it. I just want to encourage people to check out MultiFunding.com to learn more. There's lots of amazing resources there. You can go to their learning center. They have blogs, podcasts, he has books. My last question is some lessons you learned from your dad and the immigrant mentality.
So I was born in South Africa. was super cool. I went back to Cape Town last year for the first time in, I think, 33 years, and I took my wife there. I went for EO's Global Leadership Conference, and I actually get to go to synagogue there and sit in my grandfather's seat that still has his name on it. Same synagogue where my parents got married. It was a super, maybe one of the most spiritual experiences I've ever had. But growing up we moved to the States when I was 8, and growing up in an immigrant community with a bunch of people trying to figure out how to get their businesses up and running and off the ground and move to the States. Clearly, there were some invaluable lessons in that. My dad, who sadly passed away about 4.5 years ago from colon cancer, was an ophthalmologist for a long time. And I think so many of the lessons I learned from him about how you treat patients and how you take care of them, we try to think of ourselves as loan doctors. I'm not suggesting when you have someone's eyesight on your knife, that's kind of like what we do. It's not a fair comparison. But we follow the same philosophy and the same level of care, and making sure people understand their options. Our whole philosophy in our company is treat people like we would want to be treated. I had my lights turned off a couple of times when I was building my business. Easy to give advice, it's harder to follow it. And I don't want it to happen to anybody else.
Ami, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing the stories and journey. Everyone check out multifunding.com and more episodes of the podcast. And thanks, Ami, and thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Johnny, for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.